Here at Queen Street United Methodist Church in downtown Kinston, North Carolina. Welcome to the Wesley Bible Study. Today we are going through the part of Judges that everybody likes to go to in Sunday school. It's the story of Samson. And we've already gone through the first part of chapter 14 and also 13, where Samson's mom makes a deal with God that he's going to be a Nazirite, and Samson never really bought into that too well. But anyway, the story that precedes this section has to do with Samson going on his way and finding a young lion, and he tears the lion to shreds and leaves the carcass. He comes back by and he finds the carcass has been infested with honeybees. So he takes some of the honey and he eats the honey, which is not kosher. And he gives some of the honey to his parents. So they are not kosher either. And now, a question we did not raise last Sunday is, if you do not know that you are unclean, are you unclean? Sometimes it takes your wife to let you know. But anyway, speaking of wives, okay, he's marrying a Philistine girl. And they're having the big wedding feast, and there are a lot of Philistines there. Now, understand what's going on. I think a little backdrop is important. The Philistines are a very relatively advanced civilization. They are not native to that area. They're from the Aegean, so they got kind of a Greek background, and so they're more advanced in a lot of things, in science and technology. And they've come into a land that is filled with rubes, known as Israelites, and they are dominating the Israelites. So Samson is a judge in a culture that is being dominated by a more advanced culture, the Philistine culture, okay? And he's marrying a Philistine girl, so they're having a wedding feast. And these things go on for a while. Wedding feasts back then went on for like 14 days or so. So, that's a big deal. So, of course, they're partying and everybody's getting drunk, and Samson poses a riddle to the Philistines, and it is, out of the eater came something to eat, out of the strong came something sweet. What is it? Okay. And they got a bet, and the bet ain't cheap. So he's got to give them, whoever wins the bet gets 30 linen garments and 30 festal garments. Well, that's like, more than a day's pay. So they're looking at heavy consequences, and the Philistines are not going to be outdone by this rube, so they take the bet. All right, but they don't have any idea what the answer to the riddle is. So we're going to pick it up here at the end of verse 14. Okay, but for 3 days they could not explain the riddle. On the fourth day they said to Samson's wife, who was a Philistine, "Coax your husband to explain the riddle to us, or we will burn you and your father's house with fire." Well, that ups the ante, okay? Have you invited us here to impoverish us? Now they're accusing her, okay? She ain't got nothing to do with it. So Samson's wife wept before him, saying, "You hate me. You do not really love me. You have asked a riddle of my people, but you have not explained it to me." I mean, I'm your wife. You should tell me everything, right? He said to her, "Look, I have not told my father or my mother. Why should I tell you?" Some things are classified. She wept before him the 7 days that their feast lasted, and because she nagged him on the seventh day, he told her. Then she explained the riddle to her people. The men of the town said to him on the seventh day before the sun went down, "What is sweeter than honey, and what is stronger than a lion?" And Samson says something very crude. "If you had not plowed my heifer, you would not have found out my riddle." Okay? Now, understand these are euphemisms for other activities. So, this is like PG-13, folks, okay? So, then the Spirit of the Lord rushed on him, and he went down to Ashkelon, which is a Philistine town, okay? He killed 30 men of the town, took their spoil, and gave the festal garments to those who had explained the riddle. In hot anger, he went back to his father's house, and Samson's wife was given to his companion, his best man, who had been his best man. So the father of the bride annuls the wedding and gives Samson's wife to his best man. Now, I can tell you, I have been to some strange weddings, even recently. It's a family thing. Everybody's got these going on. But anyway, this is a horrible thing, okay? Because if there is a contract that is sacred across cultures, it's a marriage contract. Okay, understand it's not a lovey-dovey thing. Okay, marriages are arrangements between families, and they are binding, and it's a matter of honor. Okay, somebody breaks that, it's not a divorce. You can get killed doing that. All right, so they're not playing. And so Samson goes back to his father's house, and while he's gone, his wife is given to his best man. Well, that's not cool. All right, so let's go to chapter 15. After a while, at the time of the wheat harvest, Samson went to visit his wife, bringing along a kid. He said, "I want to go into my wife's room," but her father would not allow him to go in. Her father said, "I was sure that you had rejected her, so I gave her to your companion. Is not her younger sister prettier than she?" Oh, I love that. That is so cool. Why not take her instead? Well, that's not the deal. Okay, we've already seen that Jacob, and Rachel kind of thing. So let's anyway. So here's some more PG-13 stuff. Samson said to them, "This time I will do mischief to the Philistines." Like killing 30 of them was not mischief. Okay. "This time I will do mischief to the Philistines. I will be without blame." How do you do mischief and not be blamed? All right, so Samson went and caught 300 foxes and took some torches, and he turned the foxes tail to tail and put the torches between the pair of tails. When he had set fire to the torches, he let the foxes go into the standing grain of the Philistines and burned up the shocks and the standing grain, as well as the vineyards and the olive groves. Well, that was mischievous. Okay, now we've got Samson on animal cruelty charges. All right. Judges is a tough book. All right. Then the Philistines asked, "Who has done this?" And they said, "Samson, the companion. Samson, the son-in-law of the Timnite, because he has taken Samson's wife and given her to his companion." So the Philistines came up and burned her and her father. Well, goes around, comes around, right? Okay. Samson said to them, "If this is what you do, I swear I'll not stop until I have taken revenge on you." He struck them down hip and thigh with a massive defeat, and he went down and stayed in the cleft of the rock of Etam. So Samson kills the people that killed his wife and her father, and then he beats feet and goes into hiding. Okay? So now understand, the Philistines are the dominant culture, so they hold sway over the Israelites. So here's what they do. Then the Philistines came up and encamped in Judah and made a raid on Lehi. The men of Judah said, "Why have you come up against us?" They said, "We have come up to bind Samson, to do to him as he did to us." Then 3,000 men of Judah went down to the cleft of the rock in Etam, because they knew where Samson was. And they said to Samson, "Do you not know that the Philistines are rulers over us? What then have you done to us?" He replied, "As they did to me, so I have done to them." Well, fair is fair, right? Okay. They said to him, "We've come down to bind you so that we may give you into the hands of the Philistines." Samson answered them, "Swear to me that you yourselves will not attack." They said to him, "Attack me." They said to him, "No, we will only bind you and give you into the hands of the Philistines. We will not kill you." So they bound him with 2 new ropes, good stuff, okay, and brought him up from the rock. When he came to Lehi, the Philistines came out shouting to meet him. And the Spirit of the Lord rushed on him, and the ropes that were on his arms became like flax that is caught fire. and his bonds melted off his hands. Then he found a fresh jawbone of a donkey, reached down and took it, and with it he killed 1,000 men. And Samson said, with the jawbone of a donkey, heaps upon heaps, with the jawbone of a donkey, I have slain 1,000 men. Now, some people might say that this is a very primitive weapon, okay? But I can tell you that while he used it in an offensive way, we still use it today. In fact, it's a first strike weapon because the jawbone of an ass has killed more friendships, marriages, started more wars than any other weapon in human history.
Oh, boy.
When he had finished speaking, he threw away the jawbone, and that place was called Ramath Lehi. By then he was very thirsty, you would think. And he called on the Lord, saying, you have granted me this great victory by the hand of your servant. Am I now to die of thirst? Look, he's complaining to God. I love this. This guy is such a narcissist, okay? Am I now to die of thirst and fall into the hands of the uncircumcised? So God split open the hollow place that is at Lehi, and water came from it. When he drank, his spirit returned, and he revived. Therefore, it was named En Hakochar, which is at Lehi to this day, and he judged Israel in the days of the Philistines 20 years. All right. So, that's Samson's marriage. All right. So that's as far as I got so far. Okay. What do you think of this story? Because we often hear about Samson and the Philistines in Sunday school. So what are we to make of this? What's going on? Does Samson seem like the kind of guy that God would open the rock and have water pour out on for his? No.
And he's a judge. But
And he's a
not
judge.
Like the other judges.
No. It's like Sesame Street. Which judge is not like the other? And he is not like the other.
I know God can do whatever God wants to do, and I know you've talked about the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
How does one guy kill 1,000 people?
Well, it just means he killed all of them.
Huh?
The 1,000 means that he killed all of them, and it was a bunch.
Okay.
That's all 1,000 means.
Even how could one guy, and maybe God just gave him the power to do that. But
Yeah.
It's amazing he told the Jewish people, please, you don't kill me. Just
Mm-hmm.
bind me up and take me and give them to them.
Yeah.
So he was afraid of the Jewish people killing him, yet he's willing to take on 50, even 25.
Well, that's an interesting point. He was not willing to kill his own people in his own defense. But you're beginning to see that he's getting clued in that God is really trying to punish the Philistines and that he might be an instrument to do that. Now, I got to tell you that his rationale for doing that was unethical. Okay, and it was excessive. I mean, he made a bet that he couldn't cover, and then he had to go out and kill Philistines in order to fulfill the bet. So the thing that's interesting about the Samson story is that he's stupid and arrogant and narcissistic, okay? But somehow God is using stupidity, arrogance, and narcissism to work his way. Are these the typical tools you would think God would use?
But in the larger text, considering how he came riding on a burro instead of a stout,
Yeah.
think about the irony of that he uses a Samson character.
Yes. Yeah, it's kind of, when you say, how can one man This is the same question that is raised throughout the Pentateuch. How could some backward, nomadic, cruddy little tribe take on bigger armies, fortified cities, you know? And it seems like God is provoking the question. How can these things happen? Because that doesn't make sense. And so if it doesn't make sense, then it must be God. So is the proof of God in things that don't make sense?
Yeah, I think so. I think the proof of God defies rational,
And logic.
rational logic. There you go, that's a good word, thank you. Because, one man couldn't take on 50 men, a small tribe couldn't take on a fortified city and win without some type of either really, really intelligent people or some divine intervention.
So this is an issue in a larger context. This is an issue about the proof of God. And it's how you convince faithless people that there is a God.
Unless you actually saw it to read this, it seems like a fairy tale,
Yes.
as does some of the other books, and but even most of the other books are not as much of a fairy tale as this is. I mean, this guy is almost like a cartoon character, a
Yes.
superhero.
Yeah.
How
Superman
can,
or-
Yeah.
what guy?
So that concept of Superman and all of that is nothing new. Okay? But in this case, this is a Superman because God made him super. In all the comic books, none of the superheroes are made super by God. They're made super by
The writer.
Batman is angry because somebody killed his parents. You got Superman comes from Krypton, and it just has a different kind of gravity. There's always some kind of thing that makes. I mean, Spider-Man got bitten by a spider. Well, Shazam. Okay, he should have died, but no. So, there are explanations for superheroes that don't include God. There is some kind of a scientific basis for superheroes to be super. But in this case, a deal was struck between Samson's mom and God, and Samson was the result. He got superpowers as a result of that. I don't know that she really asked him if he could ask God to give him superpowers. I think the deal was, I'll make him a Nazarite if you let me have the kid. That was her deal. Okay? But God said, maybe I can whack the Philistines with this guy, And so he made him a superhero. But it's really in the context of how do you prove to somebody that there is a God? I happened to be in a doctor's office the other day, and when you go into a doctor's office, they have all kinds of charts and diagrams on the wall and photographs of things that you don't normally see. And up on the wall were pictures of things that I don't normally see, but I'm having issues with. And I looked at that thing, and it was, I wouldn't call it art, but I saw glands and muscles and structures, and for this thing to work, something on that part of the body has to work. And it's like, people think that there wasn't any design to that, or that all that coordination could happen because a cell morphed. You know, typically when a cell morphs, it degenerates. You know, you end up with a cancer or something. But when you look at just the structure of not just us, not just humanity, but the structure of any living thing, you know, plants. You know, the evolutionists say, well, we started out you know, as an organism, a single cell, a simple single cell. Now they've gone into simple single cells and they found it's not simple. Okay? Because you have DNA that is calculated. You know, there's an actual algorithm to how DNA works. And those, I'm not necessarily random, but I don't come up with algorithms too easily, you know? So you start seeing all these things come together. And I had a discussion with someone who was arguing on for the reason for scientific inquiry, or I don't know. My argument was that when you see it, you're looking at God's design. Okay? When a scientist sees it, they're looking for how it functions, how it works. Okay? And he says, your answer is too simple, just to say that this was God's design. No. Because the fact that God designed it inspires us to figure it out. You know, you go into, you have a geologist that goes to the Blue Ridge Mountains, and they see something that was a seabed 1,000 feet up and tilted. And you realize that billions of years ago, that stuff was higher than the Alps. And something pushed it up, okay? So the scientist is saying, how did that happen? You know? But when you're looking at it, you're looking at something that was not random. It was not random. I mean, you go to the Blue Ridge Mountains and start digging, you'll find seashells embedded in the rocks. Okay? They've come a long way, baby. And when you...
A lot of things like that you read that only a flood would explain.
Yeah.
But scientists won't go there.
Well, it wasn't a flood. It was an ocean.
Right.
I mean, that whole part of North Carolina was an ocean. And it had been an ocean for billions of years before it got pushed up into the Alps. You know? We were talking about, you know, God seeing things from the standpoint of the big picture. God always sees things from the standpoint of the big picture. We are small picture people. Okay? We really, I mean, we are not small. We are infinitesimally small. We are really, really small. You know? One of my favorite scenes in, I can't even think of the movie. Men in Black. One of my favorite scenes in Men in Black. There's a scene where they go to a locker, and they open the locker, and there's a whole world of small people in that locker that are all hail, you know, the guy who opened the door to the locker, and then at the end of the movie. One of the guys opens the door, and they are in the locker looking at very big things on the other side. And you realize in the grand scheme of things, not only are we really, 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 really small, okay, but we haven't been around that long. And for us, I love it. For us who are pipsqueaks, ants, less than ants, to challenge whether or not there's a God sort of, we're all Samsons. We're a little bit arrogant and narcissistic.
Stupid.
Yeah, that too. You know, I think we have raised stupidity to an art. but but understand that why is it important for God that we believe in God? Why is it, what is it about us more than any other living creature on Earth, just on Earth? I'm not talking about other planets because they're out there, okay? But just for us, why is it important to God that we believe he exists? And not only does he exist, but why is it important for us to understand the nature of God? You know, I can't understand why we're a priority at all. I really don't get that. Except that the only thing that speaks to me about that is that it took billions of years for God to develop an organism that could communicate with God and have a relationship with God. So why did God create? God created for relationship, apparently. It was important to God that God could create something that could communicate and recognize the value of, and try to figure out. And please understand, when we're going through the Old Testament, we seen God being pretty harsh about stuff, okay? But understand also that we're just, I mean, this is way back, and we're trying to understand. They understand that there was at least a God among other gods, and they understood that God had characteristics. But I don't think they really, I mean, this is an introduction to God. And so it's like God 101. This is not grad school God. This is God 101. And they're trying to figure out the nature of God. And as far as they can tell, because the Bible says God made us in God's image, okay? If God made us in God's image, we're looking around and saying, do we give evidence to what the nature of God is? And so we start building gods or understandings of gods that are essentially in our own image. And you can see where the flaws are in that. Okay? So every once in a while, God will come in and change the narrative. So God changes the narrative through things that we can't explain. All of a sudden they happen and we can't explain them. And we say, maybe God's trying to figure something out with us, you know? So you have something like Abraham getting a call. You have something like Moses getting the people out of Egypt and the plagues and all of that. And you start seeing conquests that nobody can explain. And then you get up to Jesus, and Jesus is trying to explain to us more about the character of God than we ever imagined. Changing the narrative. Okay? Changing the narrative to an understanding of a God who has the capacity to do anything God wants to do, but instead chooses grace and chooses love as the primary characteristic of who God is. That's the message from Jesus. You have an all-powerful God who could just slam dunk you any old time, and instead is more interested in your salvation and maintaining a relationship. That's a big deal. That's why we've got like Christmas and Easter and all the other things that remind us about the character of God. But this Samson story is trying to tell us something about the character of God. And the character of God is that when people who believe in him are being persecuted and dominated by people who don't, then sometimes God steps in. And that's a big message, because there are a lot of people who are Christians who are getting that, and Jews who are getting that today. If God starts stepping in, it's going to be a big deal. And we just started to see what big deals are all about. So, okay. Anyway, we'll get on to chapter 16 next week and talk about Delilah. See you next week.